What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Coachable Podcast. I am your host, Tori Gordon, and today I'm joined by a new friend of mine. Taylor King is here in the studio. Excited to spend some time with you today and get to know you a little bit more. We've recently crossed paths through Dr. Zand, who's been on this show, who is a dear mentor and friend. And yeah, you've come into my world and into our community recently. And immediately when I got to know you and heard about you, like, first of all, your reputation sort of preceded you a bit in terms of your work in the psychedelic integration space, but just who you are as a human is what I'm excited to learn more about, and just hear, about your work and your journey to one, becoming a wellness coach and also a psychedelic integration specialist, which you've worked with thousands of people now and helping them to integrate ketamine and other psychedelic experiences, which is profound. And so I want to talk about the importance of integration today, but also just what has led you to this work and your journey and how you infuse the wisdom and the lessons that you've experienced and received over the years into the work that you do. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really honored to be here.
Yeah. So tell me a little about your background. I know you grew up in Oahu, or that's where you're from originally. Give me a little background on how do you describe yourself? Who is Taylor King?
Other than being tall and nice. Yeah. So originally born on Oahu, moved away when I was pretty young. To California and then North Carolina. So my life was kind of always up in the air, but found some roots in North Carolina where my grandmother lived and did most of school there, would travel back and forth between summers. And when I graduated, I ended up moving back home and really getting in touch with my home, where I'm from, and reconnecting with that spirit of aloha. So,
what does that mean to you? Because I know
aloha,
the spirit of aloha. Because you write, you make music, you're a father, you're a photographer, you do so many things. And I know in something I read of yours, it said you try to infuse the spirit of aloha into all of that. What does that mean?
Yeah. Aloha at the end of the day is just the essence of love. It's a compassion, it's an empathy, it's a gratitude. It's what unifies us and brings us together. It's a welcoming. So,
yeah. That's beautiful. I mean, take me back to a little bit into terms of your childhood and growing up and your spiritual journey. When did you start to when did the awareness start to come online for you that you're a spiritual being and that your essence is this spirit of aloha, which is love? When did that start to become present in your awareness?
Yeah. I think it really, I thank my grandmother for the really deep conversations that we would have. So my biological father played baseball for the Mariners, and he tore his bicep and really fell down quickly, spiraled into drugs and addiction. And so my mom ended up leaving when I was about 2 years old. And we moved to, like I said, California and then North Carolina, and where she remarried my stepdad. And my stepdad owned several Taekwondo schools. He's an amazing human being, and what he's dedicated his life to doing and giving kids, especially the foundation and structure to grow from. But we butted heads a lot, especially through the teenage years. And, there were some tough times to the point where I needed to remove myself from the situation. So I ended up living with my grandmother for the last half of high school. And it was then where I started to develop this kind of analytical mindset of why things were the way they were, why things happened the way they did. And we would just get deep into those conversations. And from there, I just kind of continued to blossom into being the psychologist / therapist for all my friends. And I would be on random hikes with people that were well into their 30s, married or in relationships. And they're like, you have this insight that's really refreshing. And where did you learn all this stuff? I'm like, I don't know. I just lived and been through life. But what I learned was that we have kind of two options. We can become the victim to our situation, or we can be the victor. Right. And, so that was a conscious choice for me. And so my journey through life has just always been very much so that, and learning lessons and giving it back, helping others to find their light.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I mean, that awareness in general of like, we can either be the victim of our circumstance or the victor, like, is such a critical turning point in people's lives when they, one, become aware that they have a choice.
Right.
And two, they make the choice to not let their circumstance or what they've been through define who they are, or send them into despair and into a spiral.
Absolutely. It's a conscious choice. You know, it's kind of runs parallel with the idea of life is happening for you, not to you, right? It's a conscious choice to perceive challenges and obstacles and as an opportunity for the growth and development of your character, who you are. So,
yeah. And then at what point did you start to like actively seek your own growth and spiritual development? Like what was that like? Was there any pivotal moment for you? Was there any rock bottom? Like I know interviewing hundreds of people on this show,
which is amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's always some commonality and something, some through line in a lot of people who do similar work to you in terms of the profound impact that they're able to have on other people, their dedication to healing and to consciously evolving and raising the consciousness on the planet doesn't come from just like, usually it comes from pain in my experience.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, like for you, when did that start to become something that you were really focused on?
It's interesting. Some of the most beautiful things sourced from the darkest places.
Right.
I think I want to say I had a really good understanding of who I was throughout my 20s. But I want to say through COVID was where I really stepped into more of my power and understanding who I was and what I was capable of. But I was also in the dark night of the soul. So it was it was a dance of questioning myself and, you know, then feeling that power and then questioning. And I was in a toxic relationship. And after working in nightlife for so many years, through COVID, I didn't have that anymore. So I had to figure it out beyond that. And through so many different jobs and trying new things, there was a moment, I think this was 2021, where I was working a job sales, cold calling. It's just kind of thrown at me. I was like, why not? Let's do it. And at the time, again, things were really rocky in my relationship. And I had gotten an audition. I had spent years acting, so I lived in LA. And it was like everything aligned in that moment. Finally, it was like that one big break that it seemed like it was all perfect to pan out. And I spent months auditioning, thought it was going to get me out of the work that I was doing, and really started to envision this expectation that I have. And it all just cold turkey stopped. It really broke my heart. And back to the sales, and I'm making a call. Guy answers, and I said, "Hey, it's Taylor from so-and-so. Just wanted to check in." And he cuts me off immediately, and he says, yeah, listen, if I did what you did, I would take a gun, put it in my mouth, and pull the trigger. And in that moment, he hung up, and everything just caught up with me. Failure, the rejection, the not being enough. I questioned myself for the first time. It really pierced the armor. And I was like, yeah, what am I doing? What purpose do I have here? I'm not doing anything. I failed at everything. I think if there's one thing I'm decent at, it's being a dad. But even, you know, I have someone in my ear about that. And so I was vulnerable that night. I wanted to talk to my partner at the time about how I was feeling and what I experienced that day. And instead of a productive conversation, it turned into a fight. And she ended up lashing out and, you know, you're not this and you're this and you're always quitting and this and that. And I just felt really alone in that moment, and I acted emotionally, running away, which is my finding peace usually. and I took something with me that I shouldn't have. And I remember sitting in the back of my truck, just feeling alone, feeling lost, feeling like I didn't have a purpose. It was really hard. And I just remember looking up, and my son, who's been such an angel for me and throughout my journey, he popped into my head, and I had this realization, like, what are you doing? You can't. You have to be here, for him at least. And so I just made this conscious choice, this decision to, if I was going to show up for anyone, show up for my son. And I drove home. I woke up at 5 a.m. the next day. I went to the gym, and I just dedicated myself to loving me. Just exercising regularly, getting better sleep, putting better food into my body, practicing mindfulness. I'd started working more diligently with psychedelics, and at the time it was ketamine because Dr. Zand had introduced me to it. It was team plant medicine for a long time, so I was a little iffy with it, but I was doing it like twice a week, and it just changed my life. It actually opened the door to start making changes. And then I started working with Better You as an integration guide. And it's funny that, here's this kind of semi-broken person helping others heal, but that was so healing for me. And I remember going back out to Red Rock Canyon, now in a really peaceful headspace, was chasing a thunderstorm, feeding my soul. And it was right after the gym, and I'm sitting out there, and sun starts to peek through, and next thing you know, there's this beautiful pink, orange, glowing sunset and this crazy thunder lightning storm that's just dancing over the mountain. And I'm like bursting into tears because I was like, I could have missed this. And I could have missed out on so many things, so many beautiful moments. And I realized some of those most beautiful sunsets are after a storm, if you just hold on. Nature's taught me a lot about life. And so, yeah, I've been working with people ever since. As I navigated the dark, I'm helping others find their light.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. It's powerful. I mean, just even that visual of that thunderstorm and the sunset, it's such a depiction of our lives. It's like, you can't have one without the other, that we learn through contrast.
Right.
We live in a world of duality, and we wouldn't know the joy or the gift or the like bliss of what love can feel like, our own love, if we also don't feel our own pain, and how much so many of us run from that. We don't run towards the storm, we run away from it. And it's so interesting that was, you say I'm chasing the storm.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the buffalo. Have you ever heard the story of the buffalo? So when they're out on the plains, when there's a storm, the buffalo, and most animals run away, but the buffalo runs towards the storm because it knows the quickest way out is through. And it just reminds me of that, like when we come to that dark night of the soul, when we're like, this is the worst thing I could be experiencing, is like going head on into it and being like, because the only way out is through. But how much courage that takes, and I'm sure now in the position that you're in, you're working with people, who are probably on some level, possibly in that dark night of the soul, looking for answers. And I want to get into that and how you support people, but you mentioned, there's like this somewhat broken person, like helping people heal. It's like, reminds me of like what we give though in the world is what we get back in return. And it's like, sometimes when we are hopeless or you don't know what to do, it's like give, like show up and like serve somebody, and actually how much that ends up serving you and your own soul and your own heart. Like you receive something by giving to somebody else. Is that what you found like in that season?
Absolutely. Kind of like Tony Robbins says, living is giving. It's just such a genuine act of love. especially when you're going through something. It's one of the most fulfilling things that you can do. You know.
What do you find working with people is like some of the typical challenges people are coming up against when they're working or coming to you, you know?
PTSD, anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
You know, the common, we often love, or I guess develop an addiction to living in the past or the future. You know, we're either constantly worrying about a future that hasn't happened yet based on a past that isn't happening anymore. We're suffering in our imagination more than actual reality. And we get stuck there. We develop kind of a comfort, as the brain loves familiarity, right? And our survival mechanism, we think that it's safe for some reason, but that's really often what I come up against or with.
Yeah. I was just thinking about this the other day. It's like, we never overthink about positive things.
No.
Rarely. You know, the stuff we overthink about is all the negative, like, possible outcomes that we're just replaying or ruminating on or projecting into the future. Like, and you said something about our imagination. It's like, I think about our imagination as one of our primary mental faculties. And how often are we using, as adults, like, or as children, we're using our imagination to imagine and create possibility worlds, you know? I'm sure you see it with Raiden.
Absolutely.
Like, he can probably take something and imagine like a whole new world of that, what that looks like. When I was a kid, I would make up stories and dances and plays and everything. And then how, as we grow older, we get conditioned to use our imagination to not create good, but we create all of the worst case scenario outcomes. And that's how we're utilizing our imagination. And to start to harness that power again, you said earlier, is like, I really started to step into my power. I'm curious, like, what does that mean to you, like living in your power? And how does that relate to using the power of your mind to create what you want to create or feel what you want to feel?
Yeah, the power of the mind. Mind is a wonderful servant, terrible master. You know, it can be our greatest ally or worst enemy. When I think about stepping into my power, it's really about standing in my truth and authenticity as often as possible, and not wearing the social mask. You know, when you go out, someone asks you, how are you? Great, fine, everything's great, you know, and it's not usually the case. We're all going through something. Every single person that you see, that you pass in traffic, walk by, like, everyone's going through something. I think standing in your power, it's about doing something about those things and not falling victim to it. It's kind of integration.
Yeah.
Right. And it's having a self-awareness of why things are the way they are and what you want to do about it, where you want to go, and taking action every single day to creating that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about that day in the truck that you were describing, and how that day unfolded for you, and then where that led you to the next morning, finding yourself at the gym, dedicating yourself to loving yourself and creating a new life for yourself. Was it just that simple? You were like, I see I have a choice and I've got to do something different, and tomorrow I'm just going to show up and do something different? Or was it like the days following, was there ever a moment where you slipped back into that mindset of, I'm a failure, I'm not enough, what am I doing? Like, talk to me candidly about that, because I don't want to gloss over, for people who are at that point where they're like really struggling, you know, I want to give a realistic perspective of like what can they might experience as they're trying to make new, powerful, empowered choices for themselves, and the tendencies that we all have to go back to the familiar.
Yeah. It's so easy to fall back into the same patterns. But it's really about keeping your sights set on the vision that you've created in your mind. The only way that it's going to manifest is by intention and action every single day. Every rep that I took in the gym, you know, was, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. But it was also my motivator. It was my fire to not be that. What do I want instead? Continuing to ask myself, who do I know myself to be? And I think we live in a world where a lot of the paths, the roads that we take have already been created for us, the roads that we take for granted. But we forget that it took blood, sweat, and tears to create them. You know, it took going in circles and, you know, breaking down through tunnels and to find something beautiful. So nothing, unfortunately, really good in this life comes easy. It's going to take a journey, and that journey isn't going to be, I guess perfect is a perception, but it's just going to be tough. And you have to know that, and you have to be willing to not bring certainty to uncertainty, but determination that I'm going to make it through this no matter what.
Yeah. Well, because what's my other option? Right.
Don't give yourself another option. You
well,
know?
My other option is going back to the life I had, which I know I don't want.
Yeah.
Right. And I always go back to, I say this all the time, and I've probably said this on the show multiple times. It's like, choose your hard. It's hard to make a change. Yep. It's hard to step into the uncertainty. It's hard to possibly lose people in your life or have to step away from old habits. Like, yes, there's pain and there's hardship in that, but it's also hard to keep doing what you've always been doing and getting the same results. It's hard to still live in a victim mentality and feel like you don't have power to change your life, you know? So it's like, which thing makes you feel more empowered that you actually have a choice and you can do something about your circumstances versus being that victim that you kind of describe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What has being a dad taught you? And
so much.
And like, how has your childhood shaped how you show up as a father, or how you want to show up as a father?
You know, I had a father growing up, an amazing, incredible man, stepfather, and just a wonderful example of masculine energy. So I always wanted, though, to have a strong unit, a strong household, a balance of masculine and feminine energy. That's something that I definitely fought for in the relationship with his mom. But as far as how it's changed me, or I'd say more so evolved me as a person, it really connects a lot of the dots of life. You know, I think kids are very similar to psychedelic experiences where they
tell me more,
test you to expand your thinking. You can think you're aware and they'll test you. You can think you're patient, kids will test you there too. But I think the biggest reminder in both experiences is to connect or tap back into that sense of awe, wonder, and curiosity that we lose as we get older in our imagination. And then tapping into playing, you know, I think we forget that we're aged children that know how to pay bills. We got to play, you know, and psychedelics, like, we talk about healing so much and it being a stitching of wounds and can be very painful and all these things, but you can't say that dancing your ass off to your favorite music playlist like no one's watching isn't therapeutic, isn't healing. It's one of the greatest things I've ever done. And it's like a part of my, you know, it's part of my journey. So I would say it's connected so many dots being a father.
I love that. I love how you just made that correlation so much. And I'm not a mother, but I can imagine all of those things to be true. And speaking of psychedelics, like, I'm very much a proponent and advocate, a lover of the psychedelic experience. It's changed my life. It's given me perspective. It's helped me connect to my inner child, to my playfulness, to heal so much, but also to stretch my consciousness and expand and give me renewed perception. And as an integration guide and helping people integrate so many of their experiences, like, I want to want to really paint the picture of what that looks like, what is involved in integration, because we've talked about on the show many times we've had Dr. Sam on to talk about ketamine. I've talked about my ayahuasca experiences, my work with psilocybin, and they have all been transformational for me. But the number one thing that I say to anyone considering psychedelics is you can have a profound, deep experience on the medicine of whatever kind that you choose in a certain set and setting with a certain intention. Right. But it's what you do after that really makes the difference, where the real work comes in. So how do you describe what integration is?
Yeah, integration is the merging of who you were, who you are, and who you want to be. It's merging of your past, present, and future. It's intention. It's changing your lifestyle. It's a self-awareness. It's also a recognition and an understanding of how to navigate the seasons of life as they come, that kind of non-linear.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And my job I'm not a therapist, right? I'm not going to peel back layers to help you understand why you are the way you are. My job is more to help you set the waypoint as to where you want to go and what you want to create for yourself in your life moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the people that you're working with on some level do have an intention. They're there for a therapeutic reason. Yeah. It's not like you're not working with, my understanding, unless correct me if I'm wrong, it's like you're working with people who've done these psychedelics recreationally and had this crazy experience, and then they're coming to integrate this wild experience.
Sometimes, maybe. Before they have, and but professionally, yes, with ketamine, that's the legal modality now.
Yeah. So I've had some extremely transformational experiences on ketamine, low and high dose. Some that have mimicked DMT experiences that I've been on, crazy. Where I've been some where I've been completely exploring my inner psyche and the architecture of my psyche, to just really working through some different scenarios in my life. I remember the first ketamine experience I ever had was this deep, visceral experience of feeling like I am a genie in a bottle. So the way I describe it is, ketamine is a dissociative. So you don't really have, you start to not lose touch with, but you aren't as focused on your body in the same way that you are typically. Right. And as the medicine came on in that first acclimation dose, because I did it through Better You with Dr. Sam. That was my first experience with it. Yeah. And I did this at home through the program. And what I love about this program and what Dr. Sam's doing with Anywhere Clinic and Calm Clinic is making ketamine therapy affordable, and it's covered by insurance. In how many states now?
I think 10 right now, but we just, I think, expanding to 35.
Yeah, which is
amazing.
It's so really amazing. So first of all, if you're considering, if you've got treatment-resistant depression, anxiety, in you're working through things, consider this as a potential alternative and an option for you, and check out anywhereclinic.com. A plug for that, because I've experienced it for myself, and I'm doing it at home. And as the medicine's coming on, I can sort of start to feel the genie, which is me, which is my soul, the one that can create, the one that can make all my wishes come true, start to slip out of my body, out of the bottle, essentially. That my body is my bottle and my soul or my spirit is living somewhat inside of it. And so beautiful. The genie sort of came out and was massive. I was expansive. I was big. It was like I could see the essence of who I am is so much bigger than this. Yeah. And I had that deep knowing that it was a deep connection of oneness, but also I am connected to everything. Wow. And then as the medicine wore off, I could feel
isn't that the craziest
sucking
feeling?
Back into my body.
Oh, it's such a wild feeling. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. I'm squinching back into my body, and here I am. But with a new awareness that I'm connected to all things. My essence is love and unity and connectedness.
100%.
And that is who I am. And this is the part of me that is with me always. And that is where I create from. I create from that space.
Yeah.
That was my first experience. So I've had lots of different experiences on it, but I'm curious, like for you, can you give some examples of stuff that people have experienced, or yourself, of what ketamine feels like, what types of things you can experience on it? And then what are some tools that you give people as they're integrating their experiences so that they can actually utilize the insights and the lessons that they're learning? Because my fear and my hesitancy for people who are using psychedelics of any kind is do it with intention, first of all. And second, the way that we kind of disrespect the medicine or the experience is by actually not using what we learn from it. So curious, like if you have some stories to share about your own, but also like what are some integration tools that people can use?
I've heard it all. I've heard I was flying over auroras and pyramids and interstellar cataverse space, and I've heard I walked down the beach with my grandfather that abused me and I found peace and we just hugged. I've heard I hugged my inner child that just needed that love. I've heard things similar to what you said, where I'm like in the constructs of my mind and like seeing it as a library I'm kind of convinced that ketamine induces somewhat of a lucid dream. It's very visceral. But at the end of the day, ketamine is simply put, it's a medicine that lifts the veil of emotions that blinds us from seeing things as they are, as it opens the heart. And I really talk about the science of ketamine more so. I think it's a little more scientific in its energy. I think it's like a digital version of ayahuasca or any plant medicine from my experience. If you've ever seen the movie Soul, like
the Disney movie?
I think they did ketamine, like whoever created that. Yeah,
probably
for sure. Like even just the focus and the essence beyond focusing on the little things, like amazing. Anyway,
I'm gonna have to go watch that again now.
Oh my God.
With that lens.
Yeah. Like when he's falling in that little vortex or whatever, like that's how I feel almost every time. But anyway, I felt that. I felt that before. Right. So as far as the tools that I give people, again, focusing on the science, not to get too far into it, but it plays on the NMDA receptors, which activates glutamine, which is our brain's activity neurochemical in the brain, which speeds it up, which increases neuroplasticity, which basically allows us to start creating new patterns of thoughts away from the old hardwired ones that have brought us to states of depression and anxiety, rumination. What do we do about that? I don't emphasize the psychedelic experience too much because I've had journeys where nothing's happened. And I have people come to me and are like, hey, nothing's happened. It's not working. Like, what's going on? So a lot of my troubleshooting is just saying psychedelic experience isn't directly related to the efficacy of the medicine. It's a little different than psilocybin, where you get all these like beautiful revelations throughout and you're, walking through a maze, but the revelations seem to come days following. Glutamate is, I think, most active 24 hours after a session.
Okay.
So again, what do we do about that? We want to start focusing on triggers and self-talk. Those are two of the biggest indicators that ketamine is doing its job.
Yes.
Why? Because it's thoughts.
Yeah.
Right? It's feelings. Those thoughts create feelings, create moods and attitudes, create beliefs, and ultimately that's what creates our perception. So let's start focusing on where our thoughts are going. Let's start focusing on what thoughts are serving us and what isn't. Let's focus on what thoughts are even ours. The inner critic, for instance, like whose voice is that really? It's the voice of aunts, uncles, friends, bullies, peers, parents, you name it. Like when we came into this world, we were just sponges. We didn't have any thoughts. We're just swimming in a sea of them. But we start adopting others' fears, opinions, shoulds. And that ends up being the lens in which we view life through. So a big part of this journey is starting to create your own thoughts and choosing what's going to serve you, what's going to make you feel good. And then as we navigate that, navigating triggers when they come up, like where are you feeling that in your body, right? Is it in your chest? Is it in your jaw? Is it in your fist, right? Breathing into that and then redirecting your focus. What do I want instead? I give the example often, as I lived in LA for, 7 years, traffic. When you get cut off on the highway in LA, or let me say this, when you get cut off in Hawaii, like people throw the shaka and it's like, it's all good. When you get cut off in LA, people will flick you off too. Yeah. And you're like, excuse me? Yeah, you're ready to fight. It's go time. Yeah. It used to be. And, the immediate reaction is, who do you think you are? You flick them off, you tailgate them, call them every name in the book, you ruin the rest of your day. It's a destructive dead end. Conscious response to that would be, you know what? I don't know who's in that car. I don't know what they're going through. Guy could be having a bad day. He could have 2 kids in his back seat, one threw a toy at his head, the other one screaming. I don't know. The kids, so that's relatable. But what's in my control? Music, window down, catch the sunset. Yeah. And that's when we learn to like really start to navigate. We give ourselves a way out of that pattern that's usually destructive. Yeah. So that's a big part of my focus. And then the other end of it is kind of focusing on, how's your sleep, right? Are you in a routine? How's your diet? A lot of people don't know that 95% of total body serotonin, 70% of dopamine comes from the gut. So what we're putting into our body makes a huge difference. Getting sunlight helps with the circadian rhythm. Staying hydrated significantly helps our cognition. And then the most important pillar of mental health is mindfulness, journaling with 70,000 thoughts a day on average. Like, you can double that if you have anxiety. Put stuff on paper, get it out, give yourself a little clarity and actualization. Yeah. Breath work, I think, can be really effective situationally, especially in those moments. Breathe into what you're experiencing, right? And then meditation. A lot of people have this idea that meditation is the practice of not thinking. Yeah. It's not the case. It's impossible. We are going to think. We are like...
That's like telling your brain not to think is like telling your heartbeat not to beat.
Exactly. That's what it's programmed to do. It is a thinking machine. Yeah. So meditation is more the art of objectively observing. Right? Can we just observe things as they happen and not over-identify or over-analyze? That becomes the root of our suffering. Yeah. If you think about it. Yeah. So talk about meditation, and the last thing, and I'd say the majority of the call, and this is where I think intuition comes into play for me. It's intention. And I ask people, and I usually have to do a little digging, what are you looking to create for yourself? Like, what would be the game changer for you? A lot of times it comes down to self-love or leaning into gratitude or vulnerability. Is a big one, especially if their focus is healing. If we're protecting a wound, we have to allow ourselves to surrender and be open. So yeah,
powerful. Yeah, that whole concept of what you just talked about with meditation and mindfulness and being the observer for me has been the outside of working with things like ketamine to help with neurogenesis and the creation of new neural pathways in my mind and bringing down that default mode network that is just, those are the roads I have been traveling over and over and over again that have kept leading to anxiety and depression and all the things. Is on top of that is with the meditation and mindfulness is like noticing that I'm the observer, so that when I am in traffic and that thing happens, I notice that I have a choice, right? That I have, again, it comes back to acknowledging and understanding that I have a choice at all times about how I'm going to react and respond or what is the story that I'm telling about why this thing is happening, so right? Important. Like I can tell whatever story I want to tell about that guy who just cut me off, that he has 2 kids in the car. I made that story up, right? That he's a dick and that he like is selfish and doesn't care about anybody. Yeah. I made that story up. Absolutely. All of those came from within me, and which story makes me feel better. Right. You know what I mean?
Right. That's it. That's the key. What makes you feel better? Right. That's what we forget. So,
and then that's again, utilizing the power of our imagination to tell a story that makes us feel good, because whatever we believe to be true is what we'll experience. Like, genuinely. And so those things coupled with these other pieces of just that are self-care, hygienic things to do, or mental, it's like mental hygiene meets energetic hygiene, you know, of like sunlight and sleep and nutrition and all of those things is that mindfulness piece and recognizing that I am the narrator of my life. And it's like, I just had this picture of like, if I'm writing a screenplay and this is the scene that's happening right now, I get to jot down what's the person say, or what's the environment, or what is the mood of the scene. Well, I get to set the scene.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And if I want this scene to be a destructive, chaotic, intense
we can go
thriller.
Yeah.
We all know how to make a scene like that and have lived in those moments. And typically in my life, looking back on those scenes in my life that were out of control and where I reacted in ways that I'm not proud of looking back, or I was abrasive or I was reactive. It's typically when I just, I just respond in the moment without any thought. And sometimes due to certain heightened senses of stress, that depending on what the threat is, you don't have access to logic fully. Yeah. But I reckon it's like that quote from Man's Search for Meaning. Man's Search for Meaning, yeah. About between stimulus and response, there's a pause. And in that, is like your choice. And that makes all the difference. It's like, how can you notice the pause in between what's happened and how you're going to respond? And if you can stay in that moment and like notice that shift and choose something different, like that's when you become empowered.
Presence.
Yeah.
That's where your power is. Yeah. It's taking the moment to be present, because when we are activated by fear, we are living in the future. Right? We're not here. We're thinking of all the things that could happen, might happen. And that's something I preach often is like, your power is right here, right now, nowhere else. And if you can take that moment to consciously respond and make a conscious choice, yeah, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Powerful.
Yeah.
What are you currently like going through, like excited about? What's like alive in you currently?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think so many things. I think it was a really beautiful start to the year. I think like many, you like, I'm going to get in the best shape ever and I'm going to fall in love. And I did. All those things happened. And then the staying in shape thing has been consistent, but the relationship stuff was rocky. But I think I've grown more in the last 3 months than I have in a while. I've continued to go through storms in life, but this recent one was it was really eye-opening and challenging in the sense where it forced me to, I don't know, I'd say it showed me who I was versus who I thought I've been. In a good way, really good way. Yeah. I think I can be vulnerable about it. So for the first time, I'd fallen in love very quickly. And for the first time, I told myself I wouldn't have a foot out the door in a relationship. And I went really committed, and crumbled in front of me. I was cheated on for the first time. And, in those moments you question your identity, you question everything comes back. You're being good enough. You're so many things. And I realized after sitting in that alpha, F you, don't talk to me again, did a ketamine session, and I set my intention to lean into love and gratitude. And this little memory popped up of a time where I was given a second chance and I ended up thriving because of it. So I was like, you know what? I have a credit in my back pocket. What happens if I use it on someone I actually believe in? And so I leaned into forgiveness. I leaned into the essence of love and of course, my friends are like, what are you doing? No, you can't, you know, and I'd say that masculine mindset or maybe toxic masculine mindset. But, you know, and eventually they ended up supporting, and unfortunately, she kind of threw herself into dark night of the soul. Apparently hadn't done that ever before, and I choose to believe that.
Yeah.
So now I'm just kind of holding space for her as a friend, you know, and going through what she needs to go through and processing. But it was a wonderful opportunity for me to really test myself in, one, being able to forgive, two, walk through the fire with someone and support them, even though I was the one that was technically hurt.
Wronged in that situation.
Yeah, but and you know, also challenging myself to build trust and rebuild trust. You know, and when it's shattered, it's really hard. You know, you have to be really mindful and aware of your self-talk.
Yeah.
And the stories that we like to create. So yeah, but I'd say it's been very evolving for me. And yeah, otherwise I'm just looking towards having a beautiful summer with my little 3.5-year-old now, and seeing life through his eyes, because he'll wake me up in the middle of the night and tell me he has growing pains. I'm like, who are you? Like, what? How do you even know what that is?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the source of most of my love comes from that little angel.
Yeah, I had the chance to meet him over the weekend. He's so adorable, and thank you for sharing that about your relationship and what you've been experiencing, because it's powerful. You know, you don't hear that many people share about what you just shared about like coming back after repairing something after it's that trust has been so damaged, and what forgiveness looks like, and how, as much as forgiveness is for that other person, it's for you, you know. And one of the quotes that I think back to about forgiveness a lot is, forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could have been any different, and accepting what is, you know, and walking into something new, like what is now, you know, based on that. And I'm curious, you know, for you, how has that experience helped you establish a deeper level of self-trust, you know, in making choices that really serve you versus doing things that might feel like you're grasping at things, you know, trying to hold on to something versus like, I'm doing something that feels really true and honoring for me.
Yeah. I think it goes back to not just trusting yourself, but trusting the experience as you would a psychedelic.
That it's serving.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, that life is happening for you. I'm right exactly where I need to be, experiencing what I need to. If you look back, we understand how the dots connect in hindsight. We don't always know how it connects moving forward. So I look back and I realize like I needed to go through that. Why? Because now I can empathize greater with people who have experienced that. You know, like, all right, sit with it, feel it. It's okay to. Let's help you navigate. What do you want? You know, and it's okay if you want to try again, or you want to like set the ego and pride aside, like, why not? But I think in this chapter of my life, you know, it gives me another opportunity to build the best relationship I'll ever have. And that's one with myself.
I hope you guys are listening, because that's so powerful. And it's such a testament to your mindset and that being one of growth, that like, this is all serving, even if it's challenging, even if it's difficult, even if it's hard. And it doesn't mean it's ideal. Yeah. Doesn't mean it's what I wanted, right? But I can be with it, and I can give it space to, instead of resisting it and fighting it, I'm letting it be what it is. And being curious about, this is here to teach me something. This is here to show me something. You know,
the bad trip.
Yeah, the bad trip, essentially, which we all want to avoid, you know, whether it's in our regular lives or in a psychedelic experience. That is the number one thing, like one of the number one things I hear from people who are contemplating sitting with plant medicine or psychedelics of any kind. It's like, what if I have a bad trip? What is your take on that?
Such a good question. And I remember asking that to the shaman I worked with in ayahuasca. Said, well,
have you ever had a bad trip? that you would consider a bad trip?
Hell yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. But what I was told was there's no such thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure there is. And he was like, listen, I want you to view it as two sides of the same coin. The good trip is blissful, euphoric. You get all these wonderful revelations, rainbows and butterflies. The bad trip, the dark side, will teach you your most profound lessons if you allow it. So face it. Ask it questions. Why are you here? What are you here to teach me? What are you here to show me? What can I learn? What needs aren't being met? Who can I emerge as? Right? When you face the beast, you realize it's not here to hurt you. You become familiar with it and you start to understand it. And that's when you really start to stitch the wounds instead of numb them by running away through addiction to substances, alcohol, binge watching a TV show. I give credit to SSRIs and antidepressants because I think they've saved a lot of lives, but I also think they've numbed a lot of lives. It's in that process of understanding that you properly heal.
Yeah.
And that you then grow from it. You break through the soil, you find your light again. You get comfortable in the light, you learn to love, you express yourself authentically, you blossom, and then you transcend, you do something greater than yourself. You give pollen to the bees, or you give your leaves and gift them back to earth to nurture your soil and do it all over again. It's the seasons of life.
Cycles of life. Yeah. The rhythms and the cycles of life. And they're all necessary. That was one of the biggest things ayahuasca showed me was this perpetual circle of life, the circle of life that we're always on. And at some point, we're in the dark night of the soul and we think this is going to go on and on and on forever. It's
never ending. Yeah.
Forever. But there's always, like you said, every storm runs out of rain eventually. There's always a day behind that night. And there's a birth behind that death all the time. And that's what the darkness has taught me in my deep psychedelics experiences that bring me face to face with my own darkness, with my own humanity, with death, with the death of my ego, of who I thought I was, my own propped up identity, and so that I can emerge new, like this new creation, like born again. And now I like doing some of the work that I do, like watch it happen in front of my eyes. And it's like next level to watch somebody go through that transformation. It's like watching a caterpillar come out of a cocoon.
Totally. It's through significant struggle that we find significant strength. It's the caterpillar in the cocoon or the chrysalis. It's, the phoenix as you rise through the ashes. It's birth. It's so many things, so many references in life prove that.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, so powerful. So I hope that those of you who are listening, if you're in that season of isolation, of darkness, of dying to what was your idea of yourself, this idea of what you thought your life would look like. I've said that, I don't know if I've said this on this show, but I know I've said it to several of my close friends recently. As I remember, I only moved to Vegas a little over 2 years ago.
Welcome to the desert.
And I moved here after leaving a relationship that I thought was going to be forever, packing all my stuff, putting it in storage, 30 years old, and I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I can't stay here anymore. I know that there's nothing for me here anymore, and I'm going to go figure out what that is. But I was standing on a mountain in Sedona on psilocybin.
Wow.
Looking out at this expansive horizon and looking out at the red rocks and just being mesmerized and thinking and tears streaming down my face and grieving my old life and thinking, I never thought my life would look like this at 30 years old, and how can this be my life? And really grappling with that and wrestling with that, and thinking most of my family's dead. I've just lost a significant relationship. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where I live now. And I thought then, and really taking time to grieve, but then also knowing that this was a huge beginning. And a blank slate and letting go wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of something completely new. And that was 2 days before I came to Vegas. And since then, my life has completely unfolded in a new chapter in such a beautiful way. But it took the closing of one chapter to open a new one. And it takes grieving that too, of what you thought it was going to be, how you thought it was going to work out. You know, when you're so convinced this person is going to be my person, and you fantasize and romanticize about what that's going to look like. And then you're faced with the reality of what is, that's not what's going to happen. And making space for that grief. And then also in that release to welcome in acceptance, and then finding hope again, you know, for what you could create.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A bridge to unconditional love for all of it, you know, an acceptance, a understanding, and empathy, a forgiveness, a gratitude, you know, the appreciation over expectation, and then just pure unconditional love for all that is and who it's, you know, molded today.
Yeah. Yeah. Because now I love myself so much.
You should.
I do. And I love all the parts of me that got me here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't change any of those things, even the most painful, because I am who I am because of every one of those things. And to your point about you can't connect the dots looking forward. There were so many moments I'm like, how is all this none of this makes sense. Why am I going through this right now? Yeah. And now looking back, I was like, it was all leading somewhere. And where I am today is leading somewhere in the future that is unknown to me. But it gives me a deep appreciation for where I am right now, that it all is a puzzle piece that will someday connect. Yeah.
Faith.
Yeah. It's so powerful. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up today in terms of what you're working on, what you're excited about, or how people can stay connected with you?
Yeah, there's one thing I've wanted to talk about often that I don't think is talked about enough. And I think it goes back to what I experienced recently of toxic masculinity. I think first and foremost, we need more masculine men, right? We need protectors and providers. We need masculine men in general. But we also need vulnerability to travel alongside that, because that is a strength. I think what's weak is when we are unable to be vulnerable and we then recluse or isolate or lash out. And that place is really dark. And that's why we see the world the way it is today with a lot of the problems that we have, because I think toxic masculinity is very rooted in fear, right? A fear of looking bad, a fear of not being this, right? And its essence is survival, right? And survival is something that's done individually. A lot of people will do a lot of nasty things to survive, even if it means betrayal. But when we thrive, it's done indivisibly. It's when we come together. So when men are vulnerable and we create a safe space for men to communicate and express themselves, we lift one another up, we come together, we unify, and that is a frequency of love, and that is the light from a candle in the dark room. It'll light it up. So we need that. I just remember being a kid and watching it was like an interview with Kevin Garnett, and he starts to get emotional and he puts his finger up to kind of cue to cut the interview. And I remember my dad saying, you see that? Again, all credit to my dad. He's an amazing person, but not to say that everything he said and taught was the right way. But he's like, you see that? Never let the world see you cry. Never show that emotion. And I believed that for the longest. But then I realized I need to reframe that, because I also need to instill this into my son to feel what he's going through, to sit on the bench with him, not to baby him and not to let him wallow in it, but to feel and understand, and then redirect your focus to what you want, who you know yourself to be, to something that makes you feel good. You know, I think that power we really need, you know. But on the other end of it, like, again, really emphasizing create a space for people to feel heard when they do communicate, because it takes a lot for a man to be vulnerable. and recognizing that and not shaming them for being that, I think is so important. So,
Yeah. What can women do to support their man or the men in their life in expressing their vulnerability and receiving that in a way that would make you feel received and heard? So for those at home, because I know I'm fortunate to have many men in my life that have your same perspective and are open and willing to do the work and not avoid their pain. Because we all know avoiding pain doesn't give you less of it. It just, it doesn't. It just makes it prolongs it, and it makes you have to suffer in silence.
Deeper scar.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for the women out there in the ways that we can support the men in our lives in increasing their ability to feel safe in their vulnerability?
Yeah. Men and women, I think just being present, when someone is expressing themselves authentically, not living in your own world, but showing up in theirs, and I think it goes back to the art of listening and making someone feel heard, right? It's not parroting back what they're saying, but like, tell me more, right? How's that showing up for you? Like, how can I be more of a support for you? What else can I do? And I think that, this becomes the backbone, for us, because we do carry the weight of the world and so much pressure in protecting and providing, and having that support there, knowing that you have a safe space to decompress, to purge a little bit, and knowing that, that's there for you is everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And for women, it's like, check yourself if your man's vulnerability turns you off or turns you on. You know what I mean? Like, because I know from experience, like there were definitely times in my past relationships when I think back in my earlier 20s where I didn't provide that safe space. And that I held on to a lot of guilt for that for a long time before I made peace with it. But it taught me how I can show up so much better for my partner. And I was at a completely different part of my journey then. But I think it's challenging is when we're like, I want my man to be vulnerable. But then as soon as he cries, I'm like, wait, ew. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
We can't do that as women. We can't ask men to express themselves and be open. And then when they do, we're turned off and run away. Like,
But also too, like, as men, don't expect to be babied either. Like, your partner isn't your mom. Like, there is a moment where, you have to sit with what it is, express yourself, but then do something about it. Make a conscious choice. And I think that's that masculine energy that comes back. That's like, all right, let's go.
That's it.
But when you have that support, at least like, I'm not in this alone.
Yeah. Exactly. And sometimes that's all it takes. And I know you've experienced this, and I have too in my journey. And what I try to do for others is like, sometimes all we need is an empathetic witness.
Absolutely.
We just need to be witnessed. Yeah. And that space needs to be held for us to work through it on our own. We don't need advice giving. We don't need you to fix it. It's just like, let me process this and and that will lift it.
That's huge. That was one of my, something that I've been super aware of more recently. It was like not trying to fix everything, even in like working with clients.
Yeah.
Right. Like, we naturally just want to, especially as men, like we just want to fix it immediately. But sometimes, and I've created a practice of just saying, do you need support or comfort, or do you want solutions? Right. And asking that often, it's like, I just need comfort. I just need you to be here. Cool. I'm here. I ask that with clients, like, what are you feeling today? Do you want to just be heard? Do you need some support? Do you need comfort, or do you want me to give you some solutions? Because I'm always quick to I feel like I've gotten to a place where I kind of have an answer for most things. So when someone's saying something, it's like, oh, do this, do that, do this. But I'm not being present because I'm thinking of the answers.
Interesting.
And oftentimes the answers come in those moments of stillness of just listening. So,
or just holding space for someone else to come to their own conclusion.
Which often happens. We do that all the time.
Yes. And that's when it's so much more powerful is when you let that answer rise within you, where no one's telling you that. And that's really powerful. And the testament to a powerful, wise, and really good integration coach and expert, which I'm sure you take into all of the other relationships in your life. Thank you. I just appreciate and acknowledge your vulnerability and your story and the way you show up in the world and be an example for so many of the men, you know, who listen to the show is like that it's safe to be all that you are, and that, you know, no matter where you're at in your life and what you're going through, you always have a choice for how you choose to see things and what you're going to do about it. And yes, there's space for that emotion to exist. And then you can say, okay, now what are we going to do going forward? And look at what your life has become and is becoming. And just so excited to have you part of my world and community.
Thank you.
And
Same.
have your friendship. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. You guys, he's also a beautiful photographer. So how can people stay connected with you if they want to find you online or, you know, join your corner of the internet?
Yeah, you can follow
your journey.
My creative page that I've been a little more active on recently, but it's _, where I post photography and poetry and all kinds of fun stuff. I've always felt like Instagram is a place to share your life in a creative way. Mm-hmm. And my way has always been shining light on all things beautiful in the world. I want to say this place exists as many times as possible, you know?
Yeah.
And my Instagram is just the feed of all of that.
Yeah. So, living in moments of awe all the time.
Awe, wonder, curiosity.
Powerful. Yeah. Make sure you go connect with Taylor. We'll put all of that in the show notes so that you guys can find out about what he's doing and follow his journey. Just appreciate you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you guys. Thank you for listening. We will see you next week on the Coachable Podcast.